With Peter gone, I had to reconsider my options. Lifting the lockdown from floor 14 was no longer an option. I would have to find another way out of the facility. I forced my racing mind to slow down. Before I could even think of escape, I had to get to the bottom level, floor 15, and shut down Chimera. Chimera. What even was it? Samuels hadn't exactly given us a lot of information, only cryptic remarks about combining biology and machinery. How could I fight Chimera when I didn't even know what it was? I guess the only way to find out is to go find it. My mind raced as I searched for any possible way I could reach the bottom level. The lifts weren't working, and I dared not risk climbing down the shaft again. The ropes which held the elevators were much too thick to climb down any meaningful distance. Even the journey down to floor 6 had been incredibly dangerous. And even if I didn't plummet to my death, I might run into the thing from cell 17. The air circulation system. That was it. The bottom floors of the facility needed to keep a constant flow of clean air moving down to them. Every week, I was tasked with cleaning the filters on the massive machinery that kept the air moving. I'd never been inside the circulation system itself, having only let in far enough to replace the filters. But maybe, just maybe, I could use the pipes and chutes to climb deeper into the facility. I set out through the shadowy corridors, heading for the maintenance room. Under normal circumstances, it would have only taken me a short time to reach it. But now, in the darkness, everything was different. I had to remain silent, and every sound I made could draw whatever lurked these corridors to me. The path I was taking would lead me past the deactivated elevators, and I slowed down as I neared them. The shaft connected each and every floor, and if the thing from cell 17 heard me passing by. As I approached, something by one of the elevator doors caught my eye. I stopped, peering in the dim light. Every instinct I had screamed at me to keep moving, to get away from the doors. With an effort, I pushed the panic down, and cautiously approached the doors. They had been forced open slightly. Jammed between them was a length of black metal, spiked on both ends. A rope was tied to it, and led downwards into the shaft. I gave it an experimental tug. It was slack. Finally, I realized what its purpose was. A grappling hook, and a rope leading downward. Someone had used the shafts to rappel down into the lower levels. There are other people down here. The thought filled me with a sudden hope. If there were other survivors, perhaps they could help me. Maybe they knew what Chimera was, and how to stop it. First I had to reach them, though. Tentatively, I grabbed hold of the rope. Making as little sound as I could, I vaulted into the shaft and, keeping my legs straightened against the wall, began lowering myself downward. This was a gamble, and I knew it. If the thing from cell 17 came back, there was nowhere for me to run, but I felt I had little choice. The ventilation system was a gamble as well, and I didn't even know if I would have fit through it. Even though this rope was much more fit to climb down, my arms began burning. The shaft was silent, and every step I made down the wall seemed to echo and reverberate. Every moment, I expected to hear the click-clack of long, spindly feet, or catch a glimpse of burning neon eyes. As I clambered past the elevator door to level 9, something heavy impacted against it. I started, almost letting go of the rope in shock. The sound came again, and again. It was a wet, organic sound, not metallic. It was slow, steady, but I could feel the metal of the door quiver beneath each impact. A low groaning sound came through the door. "Help! Me! Who are you?" I whispered through the door. "What's happening?" The words came again. "Help! Me!" They sounded strange, human yet with an undertone I couldn't quite place. "What's happening?" I repeated, a chill running down my back. "Help! Me!" came the answer. I finally realized what was so wrong about the voice. Every time it had spoken, it was not only the words that remained the same. The phrasing, the inflection, were identical. It was like talking to a recording. The impact came again, thud, thud. With an effort of will, I forced myself to continue climbing down. Whatever was outside that door, I had no wish to meet it. I descended deeper and deeper. My muscles burned, every movement torture, every change of grip painful. As I moved downward, I passed the doors to floor 14. The prison wing. They were wide open, torn and crushed from some terrible force that had almost ripped them out of the wall. Clambering past, I peered inside. I was met with the sight of absolute carnage. The ground was strewn with mutilated bodies, all of them covered in cuts and lacerations. The walls had not been spared the slaughter. They were covered in bodies, hanging suspended by lengths of metal, by spikes torn from the walls themselves, by ropes of wire and cabling. I shuddered, forcing myself to keep moving. Whatever had escaped from cell 17, it had gone through the prison wing like a hot knife through paper. Finally, just when I thought my arms could take no more, I reached the entrance to floor 15. It too had been opened, but not by brute force. The doors had been slid aside, making a crack just wide enough for me to slip inside. I was met with a familiar corridor. I had been allowed access to most of floor 15 while carrying out my janitorial duties. Only a few rooms had been off limits. Somehow, I knew that whatever I was searching for, it would be waiting in one of those unknown areas. Creeping on, I passed through corridors that were surprisingly empty. Only a few bodies littered the ground. All had died of gunshots. Suddenly, a voice rang out, low but strong. "Stay where you are. Hands above your head." I froze. The voice had come from behind me, from a pool of darkness on the wall. I raised my hands slowly. Movement. Shadows detached itself from the wall, and became the outlines of men. In seconds, I was surrounded by 5 figures. As they approached, I could make out details. They were dressed in black military clothing, with tactical vests and balaclavas. They brandished long, silenced rifles. I felt a hand on my back, and was forced down to my knees. The barrel of a gun pressed into my head, and my own pistol was taken from my hands. One of the soldiers approached silently. The others made way for him. He squatted down in front of me, and took off his balaclava. His face was pale, deep pools of shadow in his eyes, and matted black hair fell in a waterfall around it. Everything about him, his stance, the ease of his movement, radiated self-assured lethality. Who are you?" I stammered. "My name is Conrad, but that is not important," he answered, his voice a whisper. He spoke with an almost casual air. "You will tell me what happened in this facility and provide all information you can about the status of Project Chimera." There was a lockdown. Then the power went out, and all the containment protocols activated. Almost everyone is dead. Something escaped captivity on the prison wing. Some kind of machine. Conrad turned his head to a member of his team. "Thorn, let command know their intel was correct. The second it was switched on, Chimera took over. Killed everything it could with the tools at its disposal." The soldier nodded. "It's effective, you have to give it that. Effective beyond all our estimates." Conrad turned back to face me. "And Project Chimera? What do you know about that?" "Not much," I admitted. "Only what I was told by Dr. Samuels. Something about merging living matter with machines." Conrad looked me dead in the eye when I mentioned the doctor. "Where is Jordan Samuels now?" he asked. "Is he somewhere close?" "No," I answered. "He was killed by whatever escaped the prison wing." Conrad turned to his team and swore. "Fuck. Secondary objective is no longer viable. Let command know, Thorn." Thorn whispered into a small radio attached to his vest, then went quiet as his earpiece hummed into life and crackled quietly. "New orders," he said finally. "Secondary objective is to secure Samuel's body before we exfiltrate. They want to use his brain when they rebuild Chimera." Conrad grinned, a flash of white in the darkness. "How fitting. It's almost poetic." He turned back to me. "Do you know how to reach Chimera?" I shook my head. Conrad stood up. "Thank you for your cooperation. That will be all." He lifted up his rifle and aimed directly at my head. Realizing what he was about to do, I raised my hands, trying desperately, hopelessly, to ward off the gunshot that I knew was about to come. "Help me!" The voice came from behind Conrad, and a chill ran down my spine as I recognized it instantly. The voice from the elevator shaft. Conrad and his team turned, guns coming up and aiming into the darkness. The outlines of several people were stumbling down the corridor towards us. The soldiers aimed at them, taking up positions at the sides of the passageway. For the time being, I was forgotten. "Halt!" hissed Conrad, gun trained on the leading figure. "Hands behind your head, and get down on the ground." "Help me!" said the figure. Then the one behind it repeated the call. "Help me!" The voices were identical. Conrad's second in command, Thorn, was talking into his radio. "Command, you have our visual feed. Please advise." There was a second of silence. The figures approached with their stumbling gait, now only 10 feet away from us. Thorn raised his head. "It's the failed subjects from Moloch. Open fire! Open fire!" Havoc erupted. The corridor lit up as the team began firing. In the flashes of light, I saw the figures lean forward and begin running. Behind them, more and more appeared, streaming down the corridor, 5, 10, 20 of them. Conrad's team were well trained. They fired steadily, methodically, every shot a kill. But there were just too few of them. One of the things reached them and hurled itself at Thorn. They crashed to the ground, and in the flash of light as Thorn fired desperately, I saw the thing's face. It was human, but its mouth was darkened by twitching black tendrils that crawled out of inside the thing's throat. "Help me!" it screamed. As I watched, it leant forward, the black tendrils latching onto Thorn's face, crawling inside his mouth, his nostrils, his ears. He tried to scream, but could only gargle pathetically. And then I ran. I fled, crying and weeping, cursing the government, myself, and the whole damn world. Conrad's team didn't try to stop me. They had other problems. I ran as far as I could, taking the winding corridors at random, until at last I stopped at a high steel blast door. Finally, I collapsed onto the ground. The sound of fighting had gone silent, and slowly, my racing heart slowed down. Looking up, I saw something that sent a shiver of dread through me. On the blast door, painted in black, was a large mythological beast. It had the body of a lion, but the head of a goat and what looked like the tail of a serpent. A chimera. I got up. To the side of the door was a small keycard reader, and approaching it, I could see it shining faintly. It still had power. I went to investigate it, but before I could get closer, a sound from the dark behind me made me start. Click 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 click. The sound of steel legs on the floor, getting closer. My blood ran cold. I looked around, but the walls were featureless. No air ducts, no vents, nothing. Nowhere to hide. In the darkness of the corridor, a cluster of neon red eyes ignited. They were all-encompassing, hypnotizing, the promise of death and release. I stared at them, unable to tear my gaze away. It's all over. No more pain. No more fear. From the darkness surrounding the eyes, a single long limb extended. Steel gray, bladed and many-jointed. Slowly, gently, it stroked down the side of my face as I stood, paralyzed and helpless. Then another, and many more, slowly reaching out towards me. And from the dark behind it, a voice suddenly called out. A familiar voice. Peter's voice. "Let go of him, you son of a bitch."